You're just jealous because I'm living the life you were too scared to live. Those words came from my daughter's mouth like venom. We were standing in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made her breakfast every morning before school for 18 years. The same countertop where she used to sit and tell me about her day, her dreams, her fears. Now she was 24, and she was looking at me like I was a stranger. Worse than a stranger. Like I was an obstacle. Emma, I'm not jealous, I said quietly, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the sink. I'm worried. That man, she laughed, bitter and sharp. His name is Derek, Mom, and he's not one of your church husbands who asks permission to breathe. He's ambitious, he's going places, and he sees me as an equal, not some housewife in training. I felt the sting behind my eyes but refused to let the tears come. Not yet. I just think you're moving too fast. You barely know him, and now you're talking about investing your savings into his business. There it is. Emma threw her hands up, her voice rising to fill the small space between us. Your old-fashioned, play it safe, don't take risks mentality. You know what your problem is? You're stuck in the past. You think the way you did things is the only way. Well, newsflash, Mom, it's not 1985 anymore. Women don't have to shrink themselves and play small just to make men comfortable. That's not what I'm saying. Yes, it is. You married Dad right out of college. You never took a chance on anything. You never traveled, never built your own career, never did anything except cook and clean and wait for him to come home. And now you're bitter because I refuse to live like that. I refuse to be you. The silence that followed was so heavy I could barely breathe. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to defend the life I'd built, the choices I'd made. But the way she looked at me in that moment, with pity and frustration and something close to contempt, it stole the words right out of my throat. I just don't want you to get hurt. Emma grabbed her purse from the counter and headed toward the door. Before she left, she turned back, and I'll never forget the look on her face. Cold, certain, untouchable. You're not protecting me, Mom. You're projecting. Just because you were too afraid to live doesn't mean I have to be. Then she was gone. I stood there in that empty kitchen for what felt like hours. The afternoon light slanted through the window and fell across the floor in golden bars, and I remember thinking how strange it was that the world could look so beautiful when everything inside me felt like it was breaking. I replayed her words over and over. You never took a chance. You never did anything except cook and clean. I refuse to be you. Was that really how she saw me? As some cautionary tale? A woman too scared to live? She didn't know. She didn't know about the nights I stayed up with her when she was sick, singing her to sleep even though my voice was hoarse and my body ached. She didn't know about the promotion I turned down because it would have meant traveling 4 days a week, and I couldn't bear the thought of missing her school plays and soccer games. She didn't know about the 1,000 small sacrifices I made, not because I was afraid, but because I loved her more than I loved my own ambitions. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd loved her so much that I forgot to show her who I was beyond being her mother. Maybe she only saw the surface, the routines, the rules, the caution, and mistook it for weakness. Or maybe she was just 24 and convinced she knew everything. I tried to give her space. I didn't call. I didn't text. I told myself she needed to figure things out on her own, that pushing would only drive her further away. But every day that passed without hearing from her felt like a small death. I'd catch myself setting 2 plates at dinner before remembering she wasn't coming. I'd see something funny and reach for my phone to send it to her, then stop myself. Her father, my ex-husband, told me I was being dramatic. She's an adult, Margaret. Let her live her life. Easy for him to say. He'd remarried within a year of our divorce, started a whole new life with a woman who didn't have stretch marks or gray roots or the weight of 2 decades of motherhood in her eyes. Emma adored him because he was the fun parent, the one who took her to concerts and gave her money and never said no. I was the one who enforced bedtimes and checked homework and worried when she stayed out late. I was the one who loved her enough to be the villain. 3 months went by. Then, one evening, my phone rang. It was Emma. Mom? Her voice was small, fragile, nothing like the confident, defiant woman who'd walked out of my kitchen. Emma, sweetheart, are you okay? There was a pause, and then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of her trying not to cry. Can you come over? Of course you can. I'll put the kettle on. She arrived 20 minutes later, and the moment I opened the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. She wasn't wearing makeup, which was unusual for her, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like a child again. My child. Come in, I said gently, stepping aside. She walked past me without a word and sank onto the couch, her hands trembling in her lap. I made tea, chamomile, her favorite, and sat beside her, waiting. He's gone, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek? She nodded, staring down at her hands. He took everything. My savings? $43,000. I signed papers. He said it was for the business, that we were partners. I trusted him. Her voice broke. I trusted him, Mom, and he just left. I found out yesterday that the whole thing was a scam. There is no business. There never was. My heart shattered, not because I'd been right. I didn't care about being right, but because my daughter, my beautiful, brilliant daughter, was sitting in front of me with her world in pieces, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. Oh, sweetheart. I reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. You tried to warn me, she said, tears streaming down her face. You told me to slow down, to be careful, and I called you jealous. I said you were stuck in the past. I was so cruel to you. Emma. No, I was. I thought I was so smart. I thought you just didn't understand how the world works now. But you did. You understood everything. You understood that some lessons can't be skipped, that trust has to be earned, that just because someone says pretty words doesn't mean they're telling the truth. You knew, and I was too arrogant to listen. I pulled her close, and she collapsed into me the way she used to when she was little and the world felt too big. I stroked her hair and let her cry. And I cried too, not for the money, not even for the betrayal, but for the pain she'd had to endure to learn what I'd tried so desperately to teach her. You're not arrogant, I said softly. You're human. We all have to learn some things the hard way. But I hurt you. The things I said are forgiven. Emma, listen to me. I pulled back so I could look her in the eyes. I don't need you to grovel. I don't need you to admit I was right. I just need you to be okay. That's all I've ever needed. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and for a moment she looked so much like the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. How do you do it? How do you just forgive like that? Because you're my daughter, and because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it would hurt you. I learned that a long time ago. We sat together for a long time that night, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about the red flags she'd ignored, the times Derek had been vague about his finances, the way he'd isolated her from her friends, the pressure he'd put on her to prove her commitment. She told me about the shame she felt, the fear that everyone would think she was stupid. You're not stupid, I said firmly. You're trusting. There's a difference. And the world needs trusting people, Emma. It needs people who believe in the good in others. You just have to learn to balance that trust with wisdom. Is that what you did? She asked. With Dad? I paused, surprised by the question.
We didn't talk about the divorce much. It had been amicable, or as amicable as a divorce can be after 22 years of marriage. But Emma was watching me now with those searching eyes, and I realized she was finally ready to hear the truth. Your father is a good man, I said carefully, but we wanted different things. He wanted adventure, spontaneity, freedom. I wanted stability, roots, a home. Neither of us was wrong. We just weren't right for each other anymore. And yes, I had to learn to trust my instincts about that. It took me years to admit that staying wasn't the same as fighting for something. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're not old-fashioned, Mom. You're wise. There's a difference." I smiled through my tears. Wisdom is just a fancy word for made a lot of mistakes and survived them. She laughed, a real laugh, soft and genuine. It was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in months. If you believe a mother's wisdom never truly fades, then like and subscribe. The weeks that followed were slow. Healing always is. Emma moved back home temporarily while she got back on her feet. We fell into a rhythm. Morning coffee together, dinners where we actually talked instead of scrolling through our phones, late-night conversations that stretched past midnight. She started seeing a therapist to work through the betrayal and the financial loss. She filed a police report, though we both knew the chances of getting her money back were slim. But it wasn't really about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming her sense of self, her sense of worth. And slowly, I watched her rebuild. Not into the person she was before. That version of Emma was gone, and maybe that was okay. She rebuilt into someone softer, more cautious, but also stronger in ways that mattered. She learned to ask questions. She learned to trust her gut. She learned that being vulnerable didn't mean being weak, and that admitting you were wrong didn't make you less than. One evening, about 2 months after she'd come back, I found an envelope on my pillow. My name was written on the front in Emma's handwriting. Inside was a letter.
Mom, I don't know how to say this without crying, so I'm writing it instead. I've been thinking a lot about the day I called you old-fashioned, about the things I said to you in that kitchen. I've been thinking about how cruel I was, how dismissive, how convinced I was that I knew better. The truth is, I was scared. Scared of becoming invisible like I thought you were. Scared of settling. Scared of looking back on my life and feeling like I missed something. So I ran toward anything that felt big and exciting and dangerous, and I convinced myself that your caution was fear. But you weren't afraid, were you? You were protecting me. You were trying to save me from the pain you knew was coming, and I threw it back in your face. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for not listening. I'm sorry for making you feel small. I'm sorry for not seeing how much strength it took to live the way you did, to choose love and sacrifice and patience when the world told you it wasn't enough. You are enough. You've always been enough. And everything good in me, I got from you. I hope someday I can be half the woman you are. I love you, Emma. I held that letter against my chest and sobbed. Not from sadness, but from relief, from joy, from the overwhelming, all-consuming love that only a mother can understand, the kind that survives rejection and heartbreak and silence and comes out the other side even stronger. She didn't need to apologize. She didn't need to make it right. But knowing that she finally understood, that she finally saw me, it was more than I'd ever hoped for.
A few days later, we were sitting on the porch together, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Emma had her head on my shoulder, and I was stroking her hair the way I used to when she couldn't sleep. "Mom," she said softly. "Yes, sweetheart? Do you think I'll ever stop feeling stupid about this?" I thought about it for a moment. No, I said honestly. But that's not a bad thing. That feeling is your compass now. It'll keep you honest. It'll keep you careful. Just don't let it make you cynical, okay? Don't let one bad man steal your ability to believe in good ones. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I want to be like you when I grow up. I laughed, soft and a little sad. You already are, Emma. You just didn't know it yet. There are moments in life that change everything. Moments when the world tilts on its axis and nothing is ever quite the same. For me, that moment wasn't when Emma walked out of my kitchen calling me old-fashioned. It wasn't even when she came back, broken and humbled. It was when I realized that loving someone doesn't mean they'll always understand you. It doesn't mean they'll always appreciate you. Sometimes love means being the steady ground beneath their feet while they learn to fly, even if they have to fall first. I never wanted to be right. I wanted to be unnecessary. I wanted Emma to live a life so full of wisdom and joy and love that she never needed the lessons I'd learned. But life doesn't work that way. We all have to touch the fire to know it burns. We all have to break a little to understand how to put ourselves back together. And maybe that's what being a mother really is. Not preventing your child from falling, but being there to catch them when they do. Again and again and again, for as long as they need you. Emma still lives with me. She's saving up, rebuilding, planning her next chapter. But there's no rush this time. She's learned that some things are worth waiting for. That patience isn't weakness. That the old-fashioned values I raised her with, honesty, integrity, discernment, they weren't chains. They were wings. One day she'll leave again. She'll build her own life, find her own way. And when she does, I'll let her go with a full heart, knowing that this time she's ready. Not because she listened to me, but because she listened to herself. And that's all a mother can ever hope for. Be honest. If you were in her place, would you have listened? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know what you'd do. And if this story hit you even a little, don't just scroll. Hit that like button and subscribe. Because every story here isn't just a story. It's a reflection of someone's truth. Maybe even yours.